My name is Vesa Thren, and I have spent 11 years as a diplomat for the Choral Assembly. In that time, I have negotiated trade agreements between species who hate each other, calmed rooms filled with weapons disguised as jewelry, and learned to read danger in the way someone's eyes move. I thought I understood every kind of threat in the galaxy. I was wrong about one thing. I never understood humans. When the Unity Council assigned me a new bodyguard from Earth, I did not think much of it. Humans were new to galactic society, still finding their place among older, stronger species. Most delegates saw them as harmless, curious, talkative, a little too emotional, but harmless. So when a quiet man named Corvin Hale was introduced to me as my personal security escort, I nodded politely and moved on with my day. He was not what I expected from a bodyguard. He was calm, almost soft-spoken. He did not puff out his chest or list his combat training like the guards from warrior species often did. He simply stood near the door, watched the room, and said very little. I remember thinking he looked more like someone's assistant than a protector. "You will not need to do much," I told him during our first meeting. "The summit is heavily guarded. This is mostly a formality." He only nodded. "I understand. I am still glad to be here." That politeness almost made me underestimate him even more. The summit itself was one of the most important events of the year. Representatives from a dozen species had gathered on Station Median Hall to discuss a new trade corridor that would connect several territories, including a newly claimed border region near a species called the Draxul, a proud and aggressive people known for their sharp tempers and history of conflict. Tensions were already high before the first meeting even began. For the first few days, everything felt normal. Meetings, arguments, long pauses filled with careful translation. I sat at the table while Corvin stood a few steps behind me, always still, always watching. I began to notice small things about him. He never seemed tired, even after long hours. He rarely ate much, yet never appeared weak. Once, a heavy door began to fall from a loose hinge near the hallway, and he caught it before I even realized it was falling. He set it aside gently, as if it were nothing. I told myself these were just human traits I did not understand yet. New species were often surprising in small ways. By the fourth day, the Draxul delegation grew agitated. Their proposed share of the trade corridor had been reduced during negotiations, and their lead representative, a tall being named Threxa Vorn, began raising his voice during sessions. His guards, always nearby, started standing closer to the table, their postures stiff with tension. I felt the shift in the room the way a sailor feels a storm before it arrives. Corvin felt it too. I noticed him straighten slightly, his eyes moving from guard to guard, calculating something I could not see. "Is something wrong?" I asked him quietly during a short break. "Just being careful," he said. "It's what I'm here for." I nodded, still not fully understanding what careful meant to a human like him. On the fifth day, negotiations reached their peak. The final vote on the trade corridor was set to happen, and everyone knew the Draxul would either accept the new terms or walk away furious. The room was packed with delegates, translators, and guards from every species present. I stood to give my closing statement, trying to smooth over the tension with careful words about mutual benefit and long-term peace. That is when everything changed. Threxa Vorn stood suddenly, slamming his hand on the table. "This corridor was promised to my people. You cannot simply take it away." "Ambassador Vorn, please," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We can revisit the terms after the vote. Nothing is final yet." But his guards were already moving, positioning themselves differently, no longer standing at ease. I felt my heart quicken. Around the room, other delegates began to notice too, their voices dropping to worried murmurs. Corvin stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me, though he did not raise his voice or make any threatening motion. "Everyone should remain calm," he said simply. "Let's resolve this with words." Vorn's eyes snapped to him, sizing him up the way predators often size up smaller creatures. "This is not your concern, human." "It is," Corvin replied evenly. "She is my responsibility." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might settle. Then one of Vorn's guards, perhaps overwhelmed by frustration or pressure from his leader, made a sudden move toward the table, weapon raised. The room gasped. Chairs scraped as delegates scrambled back. I froze, unsure whether to run or stay perfectly still. What happened next unfolded so quickly that my mind struggled to keep up. Corvin moved, not with panic, not with hesitation, but with a calm, controlled speed that did not match anything I had seen from a human before. He closed the distance to the guard in less than a second, redirecting the weapon safely upward with one hand, while using the other to firmly, but without cruelty, guide the guard down to the floor. No blood, no shouting, just quick, precise control, like watching water flow around a stone. A second guard lunged from the side, and Corvin turned to meet him just as smoothly, catching his arm mid-motion and using his own momentum to bring him gently but firmly down beside the first. Within moments, both guards were restrained, disarmed, and completely unable to continue. The entire exchange lasted maybe 4 seconds. The room fell silent. Not the tense, murmuring silence from before, but complete, frozen silence. Every delegate, every translator, every guard from every species stared at Corvin as though seeing something impossible. Even Threxa Vorn, a being known for his boldness, stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his earlier fury replaced by something closer to shock. I stood there too, staring at my bodyguard, the quiet, polite man who barely spoke unless spoken to. He was breathing evenly, completely unshaken, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. He looked down at the 2 guards he had subdued, then glanced around the room, as though embarrassed by the attention. "They're not hurt," he said calmly. "Just need a moment to calm down." Nobody responded right away. The silence stretched on, heavy and strange. Finally, one of the older delegates, a soft-spoken being from a peaceful, scholarly species, broke the quiet. What was that?" Corvin simply shrugged. "Training." But I could see it in the eyes of everyone present, the same question forming in their minds. If this was simply training, what were humans truly capable of? Later that evening, after the summit had been paused to allow tensions to settle, I found myself sitting with Corvin in a quiet lounge overlooking the stars. Station security had reviewed the incident and confirmed no one was seriously harmed, and the Draxul delegation, shaken by what they witnessed, had quietly requested a short recess before continuing talks. "You could have told me," I said, still processing what I had seen, "that you were different." He looked at me, a small, tired smile on his face. "Different how?" "You know what I mean. The way you moved, the way you reacted. Humans are not supposed to be that fast, that strong." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Earth wasn't an easy place to survive," he said. "Long before we ever left our planet, we had to deal with things that could kill us. Diseases, predators, disasters, even each other. Over time, that shaped us, made us stronger and more resilient than most people expect. But your diplomats, guards, politeness experts, not that." I still couldn't fully put into words what I had witnessed. "We can be both," he said simply. "Being capable of something doesn't mean we want to use it. Most of us just want peace, like anyone else. But when someone we care about is in danger, that part of us doesn't stay hidden anymore." I sat with that thought for a long time, watching the stars drift past the window. All this time, I had seen humans as new, fragile, still finding their place in the galaxy. I had underestimated the quiet ones the most, the ones who did not brag, who did not display their strength, who simply stood by the door and watched. Word of the incident spread quickly through the station. By the next day, the mood among delegates had shifted noticeably. Guards from other species who once treated Corvin with polite indifference now watched him with quiet caution. Even Threxa Vorn, when passing him in the hallway, offered a slow, respectful nod, an acknowledgement I never expected from someone so proud. When negotiations resumed, the tone was different too, calmer, more careful. The Draxul, though still firm in their demands, no longer pushed with the same aggressive edge. Whether it was genuine reflection or simple caution, I could not say for certain. But the trade corridor agreement was eventually signed, with fair terms for all sides, and the summit ended peacefully. A small miracle, considering how close it had come to falling apart. As the delegates began departing the station, I found Corvin near the same lounge window, watching the ships prepare for departure. "You did well today," I told him. "All of us owe you thanks." He shook his head modestly. I just did my job. No, I said. You did much more than that. You kept the peace without needing to hurt anyone. That takes more control than most people realize. He looked at me for a moment, something thoughtful behind his eyes. That's kind of the point, he said. Being strong doesn't mean using that strength carelessly. It means knowing when not to. As our ship prepared to leave the station, I found myself reflecting on everything I thought I knew about humans. I had assumed they were simply new, inexperienced, perhaps even fragile compared to older species. But now I understood something deeper. Humanity's strength was not loud or boastful. It was quiet, controlled, and deeply restrained. A strength that revealed itself only when truly necessary, and disappeared just as quickly once the danger had passed. I glanced at Corvin one last time before we departed, standing calmly near the door as he always did, watching over everyone without needing recognition or praise. Perhaps that was the most unsettling thing of all. Not the speed, not the strength, but the fact that such power could remain hidden behind such gentle, unassuming eyes until the moment it was truly needed. And in that quiet, careful restraint, I finally understood why so many species in the galaxy had learned to respect humanity, not because of what they could do, but because of what they chose not to do, until there was no other choice left.